Hey everybody, Brian here. So we just went through some pretty crazy trickery, as I would call it. Some hack magic, where we did everything we need to do to successfully install Sonoma. And I know a lot of it seemed like some pretty weird stuff, but now you'll see the payoff to all that trickery as we'll finally get Sonoma up and running. So let's do that. I've rebooted, and the first step is to go into your boot menu. I'm hitting F8. Choose your USB drive where you have your EFI folder and your Sonoma install files. I'm hitting the spacebar immediately so I can see the additional menu items, otherwise OpenCore will just automatically boot to the first available boot drive. And now we're going to unlock CFG in our BIOS. So choose this mod grub shell. And now you want to type setup _var _cv space CPU setup 0x44. Remember, that was the offset that we found when we searched the BIOS file. You might have a different offset, so just make sure you put whatever you found in your BIOS when searching the BIOS for the CFG lock info. And then 0x01 space 0x00. Just make sure you have the command as so, enter, and there'll be some output. The main thing there is that it successfully obtained CPU variable, so we're good to go. Type exit. And to confirm that the CFG has been unlocked, you can use this Control MSR E2 tool. I've selected that, I'm hitting enter, and notice in the bottom it says this firmware has unlocked MSR 0E2. That means CFG is unlocked. With that out of the way, now you can choose EFI, external, DMG. Yours might look a little bit different, but just make sure you choose whichever one corresponds to your USB install drive where you have the EFI folder. And then hit enter. You might have to wait a little bit. And don't be alarmed if you see this wake failure error or other errors at this point. As far as I can tell, they don't have any impact or meaning on anything. Although it would be nice to know what on earth they are and how to get rid of them. And it might seem like it's frozen at this point, but just have patience, let it do its thing, it'll resume. And now you'll see a whole bunch of output on your screen. I'll skip ahead. Okay, and now you should see a screen asking you to choose a language. I'm choosing English. Next. First thing to do is go into disk utility. So choose it, continue, and just make sure you have a clean partition where you want to install to. So I know I'm installing onto this 1 terabyte disk that I have, Sonoma SB. Just for good measure, I'm going to hit erase. I'll keep it named Sonoma SB, format APFS, erase. So that's done. You can close out of the disk utility. And I'll click on reinstall macOS Sonoma. You might just see install macOS Sonoma. Because I already have Sonoma installed on my system, that's probably why I'm seeing reinstall macOS Sonoma. And at this point, by the way, you can just connect your Wi-Fi. That airport Itlwm Kext will already be doing its magic. So just choose your network, enter your password. Alternatively, you can be connected by Ethernet at this point, since this motherboard's Ethernet works out of the box. Join. So Wi-Fi is now connected. With the reinstall or install macOS Sonoma option selected, hit continue. And now hit continue again. By the way, at this stage, if you see an error that says could not connect to the recovery server, just hit continue again at the next step. Sometimes I notice that you have to give it a little bit of time after the Wi-Fi has been connected. And just agree. And now choose where you want to install Sonoma. I'm choosing the disk that I just erased and formatted. Hit continue. And now you'll see a message similar to what I'm seeing here, about 2 hours and 32 minutes. It won't actually be that long. So now what's happening is all the additional Sonoma install files are being downloaded. Remember, what we initially downloaded for our install disk was about 770 megabytes. So the full install requires about 14 gigabytes. So this tends to take about 20-25 minutes, depending on your internet connection, obviously. so I will skip ahead. Okay, so now we're seeing a reboot as expected here. So be sure to go back into your boot menu. So again, I'm hitting F8. And again, choosing the USB drive. Again, hitting the spacebar. And now notice we have this macOS installer entry that we didn't see before. That indicates that the first phase was completed. All the Sonoma install files were downloaded. Now you want to hit 5 and then enter, or just hit enter with that entry already chosen. Again, don't worry about the wake failure error and the other errors you're seeing. Now you'll see the Apple logo, and in my case telling me about 29 minutes remaining, and it won't be that long. I'll skip ahead. Again, it's rebooting, so this is expected. And as before, during a reboot, just make sure you go back into your BIOS boot menu. I'm hitting F8, choosing the USB drive once again, spacebar, and we want to go back to the Mac OS installer to continue the installation procedure. Enter. You'll see a whole bunch of screen output. I'll skip ahead. Again, a reboot, so you know what to do. Go back into your BIOS, choose USB drive, and now you'll notice an entry Sonoma SB. So that means Sonoma has been installed and we can now boot it up. So choose that and hit enter. And now you saw the Apple logo again. And it looks like another reboot, so go back into your boot menu. Choose the USB drive. And choose your Sonoma install SSD again. And at this stage, you're into the Sonoma setup procedure. So just hit continue, hit the arrow. And again, choose your language, next. And then your region. I'm not physically in the US at the moment, but I'm choosing US. You can choose additional languages and import sources at this stage. I'll skip that for now. Accessibility, I'm just going to hit not now. Choose your Wi-Fi network, or you might be using Ethernet. You'll see a data and privacy window. Continue. Migration assistant. I don't need to do that, so not now. If you have an Apple ID, you can enter it here. Or you can create one. I have an Apple ID already, so I'll just enter that here. Or you can set that up later, by the way. And your password. Again, don't worry if there's a pause. This step can take a little bit. If you have an additional Apple device, you'll get a message and a code. So enter that code if you need to. Yes, I've read. I took one of those speed reading classes, so there we go. And now you'll be asked to set up the computer account. And then next. And with iCloud set up, Case fans are spinning like crazy. I wonder what iCloud is really trying to do. Maybe it's using my GPU to mine bitcoins. That'd be pretty diabolical. I'm just keeping all these default. And then choose your time zone, wherever you happen to be in the world. I'm choosing Boston because I'll be flying into Boston in about a month. It's keyboard setup assistant window. Continue. Once you hit a key to the right of the shift key. And then as well to the left. ANC US, that sounds correct. You can skip this step if you don't have an external audio interface. So I'm going to download the drivers for my RME Babyface Pro. I'm on the RME website under drivers. And I'm just going to download the latest driver. And then I'm going to launch this package. You'll You'll often see this on a Mac. You need to allow system extensions. So open system settings, allow. Not sure why the sample rate is 32,000. Let's set that to 48,000. Now because I have to reboot as it is for this audio driver to be fully installed, this is a good time to just copy our EFI folder from the USB drive over to our SSD drive where we have Sonoma. So open your EFI folder on your USB drive, and remember we copied some tools over. So I'm just going to drag these onto the desktop. And then one of the tools is Mount EFI. So let's click in here, and I'm going to click on this Mount EFI.command. It wants me to download Python. So I'll hit yes, enter password. Okay, here's where I have Sonoma. So that is disk number 4 shown here. So I'll just hit 4, enter. So here I have my EFI from the USB drive. Here's the EFI from the Sonoma SSD drive. So all you need to do is just copy the EFI folder from your USB drive, then go into the EFI partition on your Sonoma SSD, and paste. So now I'm going to hit reboot, and then we'll go back into Sonoma and confirm everything looks good. So we rebooted, and you need to go back into your BIOS boot menu. Now we see this additional entry. So here's the drive that we installed Sonoma to, and we copied the EFI folder over, which is why it's now showing up here as a boot device. So I'm going to choose that. Again, I hit the spacebar as usual. Here we have Sonoma SB. This is what we're going to boot to. Same thing we did when we booted from the USB drive now. This is all happening directly on the Sonoma SSD. So I'm going to hit enter. And there'll be some output on your screen. By the way, later you can disable that verbose output. Okay, now that we rebooted with our EFI folder on our SSD drive for Sonoma, we can check a few things. Go up to About This Mac. So we see our processor naming is showing up, graphics, memory, all looks good. Now click More Info, and then scroll down, hit System Report. Under audio, we see the GPU audio output. I'm currently connected to HDMI. If I was connected through DisplayPort, this would show transport DP. And I will actually switch over to the DP output and confirm that that's working fine. Okay, we're back, and as you can see, DisplayPort output is working fine from the GPU to the monitor. And we can check one other thing about DisplayPort. I'm in the About section here. Hit System Report. Audio. Here's my monitor. So now we see the DisplayPort audio output. These next ones are the inputs and outputs on the motherboard. And then my USB interface to Babyface Pro. So you might see something a bit different here, but the key is that all the audio devices are showing up. Bluetooth, third-party dongle, that's what you want to see, oddly enough. We'll test that in a bit. Ethernet, we see the Quantia and the Intel controllers here. Quantia is showing max speed 10 gigabits a second. Graphics displays, so metal supported, that's what we want to see here. Memory, here are our two DIMMs, 6400 megahertz, so XMP is enabled and working here in the Mac. Here are my 4 SSDs. You might see something a little bit different. PCI, sometimes people think they should see a whole bunch of entries here, but this is fine. We're just seeing the Thunderbolt related stuff in USB 4. And under Thunderbolt, we see these two ports up to 40 gigabits a second. Now I can't actually test that because I don't have Thunderbolt devices, but this at least shows that all should be in working order. Under USB, we see the motherboard's 2 USB controllers. I have several devices plugged in, so they're appearing here. This one here is the Thunderbolt related USB controller. I don't have anything plugged in at the moment. But if I plug a USB 3 device in one of the rear Type-C ports, we should see something there. You So I just restarted the system information. Now we see a Samsung T7 Shield that I plugged into one of the Type-C ports in the back. Under network, all is well. I'm connected to the internet right now through Wi-Fi, so I know that's working. And I'm going to test these two internet connections here in a bit. That was one sanity check. Now let's look at some other functionality, make sure things are looking okay. Earlier we added SSDT-SBUS-MCHC. This is a pretty useful SSDT because it can ensure the Mac will report things like CPU temperature correctly and do correct reporting on memory usage. So a pretty good thing to have in place. And now let's check that it's doing its thing. So open up a terminal and then enter this command here. And then hit enter. And that's what you want to see here, these two entries. If you see one entry, then something's off. You might want to re-edit the text file and recompile, go back to the guide. Now we'll do a thorough check of our USB mapping. So in the tools that you downloaded earlier, remember we added this Hackintosh tool. So you can just open that right up, go to USB. Here we see the 4 Thunderbolt ports for this controller. And then the next 15 correspond to this controller. We chose 15 ports when we did the USB map, so here they are. And if I plug a device into every single one of these available ports, then these will all light up, with the exception of these two, HS1 and HS2. So you should do that as a sanity check. Just take a USB 2 and a USB 3 device and plug them into all the ports in your motherboard and case. Okay, and there we have it. I've confirmed that all of our mapped USB ports are working. Now, HS1, HS2, I have never been able to get those to light up. I don't think these are actual physical external ports. I think there's something internal related to Thunderbolt, of course, since they're part of the Thunderbolt 4 controller. Safe to say we have everything in order with USB, which is a pretty big deal. Another check we can do is to make sure that power management is working okay. So let's explain in the Dortania guide. I have a link to that. We need the I/O Registry Explorer tool for this. So you want to copy this text here. Now we actually have that tool already from when we were on Windows getting everything prepared. You may recall we downloaded this already, I/O Registry Explorer. So just click that and then Control left click. Otherwise I find it doesn't seem to open because of security settings in Sonoma. And this is what you want to search for, and it has a few hits. And then afterwards, just clear the search. And here's what you're looking for. This corresponds to what the guide says to look out for, to confirm that it's working. And we have a similar result. Now with a Hackintosh computer, one of the things you'll run into sometimes is you'll keep the computer on maybe overnight, and then the next day you press a key and nothing happens. The computer's frozen, you have to reboot. But then once you do get back in the computer and look at the log files, you see that Mac decided to wake up in the middle of the night to do some sort of maintenance tasks or whatever. And when that happens for some reason on a Hackintosh, it sometimes causes crashes. So one thing that is generally recommended to do is just disable various types of sleep behaviors that really don't make sense on a Hackintosh, and they don't really have any negative impact on anything. So what you do is you just issue these commands in a terminal window. This is on the Dortania site on the section for fixing sleep. So I've opened a terminal window, and now you can just copy these commands. And you'll enter a password because you're using this sudo, so the elevated privileges mode, to make these changes. And then likewise with the other commands, which probably won't require a password. So there's a message about how this last command will impact Find My Mac feature on a desktop computer. I don't think most of us worry about finding our computer. You can also read the details on what all those commands did. And Again, bottom line is this is a widely accepted thing that is done in the Hackintosh community, so I wouldn't worry about these commands. They're fairly tried and true, and I can say in my case, this fixed every single problem that I was having with these sleep crashes when I would wake up the next day and get into the computer. So this is a really good thing to do to guarantee increased stability on a Hackintosh. And there's one other thing we can do while we're here. Notice where it says in your config.plist, so there's some things we can look at there. So go to your tools folder that you copied earlier from your USB drive onto your desktop. Run mount EFI command, that is. And then you want to look at whatever drive corresponds to where your Sonoma install is and type that number. And your password. And then back under tools, go to the proprietary folder, run proprietary command, and then go to File, Open, and find the EFI folder you just mounted. Under EFI, OC, config.plist, open. So it talks about this MISC boot hibernate mode should be set to none. So go down to the miscellaneous section. Here it is, MISC boot hibernate mode. We already set that to none. And then go to the NVRAM section. And it says we should use this keep SYMS equals 1 as a boot argument, which we already have. And we can also add this SWT_panic equals 1. I guess we could have done that earlier when we were setting up this config.plist, but in any case, we'll add it now. And then go to File, Save, and then close out of there. Yes, you want to save changes. So there, now you've made some changes that should ensure you have better stability when it comes to sleep and wake. And in this page, it also talks about how USB tends to be the main culprit of sleep issues. Now, remember in the previous video, we went through the whole entire process of USB mapping. So one of the benefits of doing that is to try to make sure we have stable sleep-wake in the first place. But that doesn't always fix the issue, so even though we did that very thoroughly, these additional changes we just made will also go a long way to ensuring even more stability. And you'll have to reboot your computer for those config.plist changes to take effect. And we can also confirm that the 6950 XT is indeed able to perform hardware decoding on the Mac. So go to your downloads. You'll see this VDA decoder checker. Hit Control and then left click open. Otherwise you might get a warning that Mac couldn't open it. And hit open. And here's what we're looking for. Hardware acceleration is fully supported. Alright, now I'm just going to do a quick test on my Wi-Fi connection through the site speedtest.net. This obviously depends on the internet provider, the quality of your router, a lot of other things involved. But here we go. And now I'm going to plug an Ethernet cable into the 10G connector on the motherboard. Now I'm connected to the internet with the Aquantia Ethernet controller. So I'll do a quick test. And now I'll do the same thing with the Intel Ethernet controller. So now I'm connected to the internet with the Intel Ethernet controller. We'll see how that goes. So pretty similar results between the Intel and the Aquantia Ethernet controllers. Now obviously if you test in a local network environment, you'll see higher speeds that come closer to the theoretical maximum performances of those controllers. Now let's test Bluetooth. I don't actually have a Bluetooth mouse or keyboard, and I know that's pretty ironic given this setup, but I can test Bluetooth file transfer. So I'm going to go into System Settings, Bluetooth, and I see my MacBook. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my MacBook and try to send a file to this computer. And for that to work, we want to go to General, Sharing, Bluetooth Sharing, make sure that's enabled. Okay, so I have a message from my MacBook, so I'll hit Connect. Not sure what that's all about, but we'll allow it. Okay, so we saw a file transfer, and that went to our download folder, I believe. And here's a file that I sent from my MacBook. All right, now we'll test the other way, sending a file from this computer to my MacBook Air via Bluetooth. So here's the Bluetooth file exchange. I'm just choosing any file. Hit send. Here's my MacBook Air. Send. Okay, and it looks like we had a file transfer. So we just verified that Bluetooth seems to be working okay. We can send in, receive files. One thing you'll probably want to do is confirm that iServices are working, so iMessage, FaceTime, etc. Now with this airport Itlwm Kext, you're probably going to find that iServices like iMessage and FaceTime will not work. So I'll show you one way you'll confirm that. Open iMessage, and then go to Messages, Settings. And because I have a MacBook, I'm going to set up my MacBook to use one email address and then this computer to use another. So I can try to send an iMessage from one computer to the other. In this computer, I'm using one email address. Notice how it says you can be reached for messages at, and I checked one. And then down below, start new conversations from, is also that same address. On the MacBook, I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm in Messages, Settings, and now I have it set to the opposite. So here, you can be reached for messages at, and I specify the other email address, which is likewise shown down below, start new conversations from. So now, if iMessages is working, I can send a message to myself. So I'll type my name, and there I see myself. That email address is the one corresponding to my MacBook. So I'm going to try to start a conversation with myself. Now notice this blue status bar. It's probably going to stay here for a couple minutes and then tell us that it failed. So I'll skip ahead. And there we have the failure, not delivered. So let's now switch to the Itlwm Kext and use Heliport and confirm that we can get iMessage working that way. So now we have to disable airport Itlwm and then enable Itlwm. The way I showed you when we were building out the Kext folder. First we have to mount the EFI partition on the SSD. So I'm launching mount EFI command, enter whatever entry corresponds to your Sonoma SSD, password, and now with the EFI mounted, launch proprietary. So I'm clicking proprietary command, file, open, and I'm going to my EFI SSD, and then open your config.plist, go to the Kext section, and then what you want to do is set this airport Itlwm Kext to disabled, so false, and Itlwm true, and then save this file, and you can close out of everything and reboot. For safe measure, just clear your NVRAM. So I've rebooted, and right away Wi-Fi is not working. That's to be expected. So now with Itlwm enabled, to make a Wi-Fi connection, we have to use that Heliport. You should have that in the tools folder that you created earlier. So launch that, agree, and put it into your applications folder, and then go into your applications and run Heliport. And now you'll see a new Wi-Fi gadget appearing here. And because I've used Heliport already, it already made a connection. In your case, it won't be connected right away. So what you'll see when first looking at this control panel is you might see some weird garbled output. Just give it some time. And then you should eventually see a list, just like any typical Wi-Fi gadget. And this seems to have a little glitch where it'll show a whole bunch of entries selected. Just make sure your mouse is hovered over the one you want to connect to, and choose that network. And just enter credentials like you would with any Wi-Fi. And then you should be connected to Heliport. And now we're going to redo that test. So go back into iMessages, and you'll see your failed message. Typing my name again, and I'll do the same thing. I'll try to start a conversation with myself. Hit enter. Now notice this time we have a delivered message, and on my MacBook, my other email address is receiving that message. So I see that, hi again Brian, and now I can start talking to myself. So I sent a message from a MacBook, So now you've confirmed that Itlwm is giving you iMessage connectivity. Now we can confirm FaceTime is working also. Okay, so now we're going to test FaceTime. I'm on my MacBook right now and I have it set to be reached at one email address, and then on the computer it's set to receive on a different address. So it's kind of like being John Malkovich, I'll warn you, that's kind of creepy. So what I'm going to do is initiate a call. So from the MacBook, new FaceTime, and I'm going to type that email address that I can be reached at on the computer.
What happens when a man goes through his own portal?
We'll see.
And then FaceTime audio, because I don't have video set up on that computer yet. Okay, now on the computer, I see a call just came in, so I'm going to answer it. And we see audio output on both screens from both computers, so I'm having a conversation with myself. Like I said, this is kind of creepy, so let's end this.
Malkovich.
Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to initiate the call from the desktop. So I'm going to start a call there and type the email address that corresponds to what the MacBook can receive.
Malkovich.
And again, FaceTime audio. And then on the MacBook.
Malkovich! Malkovich.
Once again, I'm talking to myself in this bizarre John Malkovich-ish parallel universe, and I don't want to go crazy, so we're going to end this. We've confirmed that everything is fine with FaceTime in both directions, so let's move on. In the next video, we'll go through some benchmarking. We'll especially take some time to look at how the 0x129 Intel microcode fix is faring and what we can do to make that work a little better, as well as some additional benchmarks. And that will be the final video in this series. So look out for that next video.